Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be going over what I think is honestly one of the most simple yet overpowered mixing tips that you could use to really clean up things and make space. A lot of times people often fall into traps of thinking you need like crazy expensive plugins and not sure how to get a sound to fit without having that. But the truth is, you can really get professional results with the most simple of tools, literally things like some EQ and compression. I'm sure that's something you already know. But I was working on this track yesterday, and I had the perfect example to kind of make into a video here because it's insane what the simplest change actually made to this track. So to very quickly demo this, I'm going to play the intro here. It starts like this. We just have some really dark kind of high cut hats, and there's this little pluck that I made that actually exists really low in the frequency spectrum. You're going to notice here, when this bass comes in, I think it actually fits quite nicely. It's not necessarily competing with the bass by any means, but they exist in a very similar region in a way. They're not right on top of each other, but it's similar. Then it goes into something like this. But we're going to quickly solo, and we have to enable these automations so we can hear the changes here. This is the pluck I was talking about. If we open up a brand new EQ, you can see kind of where this exists. So our bass is actually right down here, and right on top of that, we have the fundamental of this sound, which exists in this region, which I could solo for you. All of this. This is kind of the problem area, or at least what was before I fixed it, and I'll show you how. And then breaking down the sound further, above that, we have all of this stuff. It actually just changed octaves because of the pattern, so that's why it's a little different. But we're going to go ahead and get rid of that, and take a look at what I changed. So we're going to play this with the bass here, just these two right now, like this. Now, if I take off a certain plugin, this final EQ that's at the bottom, you're going to notice these two start kind of competing with each other in a way that sounds really bad. I'm going to demo that exactly. So with it on, which means clean, it's like this. Well, let's turn it off. So hopefully that difference is kind of obvious to you. I know sometimes if you don't really have a trained ear for that, it might not be, but we're going to listen to the pluck on its own for it to be a little more obvious. So with it off, pay attention to how muddy and strong that fundamental is versus this. See, it gets a little quieter because what we've actually done is this simple. You might be wondering what this is, but you probably know this. This is just a little EQ bump that we're reducing. But I'm going to explain exactly what's going on. You'll probably get it once I play it with this open here, but it looks like this. So all I've done, I noticed this region, the lowest part of this sound, was a bit overpowering, and especially because, this is a low area on the frequency spectrum, it's about 200 hertz, that's going to be problematic. It's going to compete with our bass, it's just going to really muddy things up and be kind of tiring to the ear at the same time. So what I did initially is I made a new, EQ point and dragged it down just about a decibel or so. But after that, this is something that I did in Pro Q3. There are other EQs, even free ones, that can do this, which is really helpful, so don't let the fact that I'm using an expensive EQ kind of put you off of this. All I did is I enabled dynamic range here, which is going down an extra 3.5 decibels, negative 3.5 specifically, it's going down. And that means whenever something is overpowering that region, it's going to automatically duck it more. So look at this again. See how it's moving when that note hits and then it's springing back up. And if we compare this on and off again, see, it just kind of gets a little too strong if we didn't do this. But this is a sound that you probably thought oh, I might have to try saturating that region, maybe doing some compression to get the level a little more even. And I am doing stuff like that earlier in the chain, but this is something that you could fix with a very simple EQ. That's all it took. And oftentimes you're going to find a lot of sounds are quite like that. We have another example later on in this track towards the drop. The drop isn't done, so I'm not going to play the whole thing. But the lead synth to the drop sounds like this. So this patch is just a weird little wavetable I found where I'm moving sync and wavetable position at a very fast rate. You can see that here. So this sound, if we go into our effects and take off everything, you're going to notice it's very harsh. There's a lot of high end. I'm actually reducing some here as well, but we'll fully take that off so you can hear just how harsh that high end is. And this is another thing I fixed with just some EQ. There's other effects as well that are doing different jobs, but you see we turn on this EQ in Serum, which you can see exactly what it's doing there. Reduces it a bit, but it needed more. So we turn on our effects. You'll notice under EQ, I I rolled off any unnecessary lows and the highs. Watch the difference this one makes versus this. Just a bit darker, but it's quite nice. I'm also doing some saturation to just kind of smooth out the tops and everything else as well, to be honest. But you'll notice that versus the original unprocessed one just sounds a lot better, and in the mix as well, it does a good job. So all of that is possible just regular EQ, you don't even have to use dynamic EQing. But really quickly, I thought as well, before we wrap up this video, I should give a brief example of dynamic EQing again, and kind of how you go about setting it up, because I thought of a really good way to do so. So we're in an empty project here. This will do, actually. This is a full drum mix, but I think this is a great example. There's a couple of things we could do with this. So we're going to put it on the mixer channel, and we're going to open Pro Q3, or any EQ that has this capability. So you're going to listen to it and as well look at this at the same time, because you're going to notice you're going to see the sounds, obviously. That's how EQ works. So like, here's our kick, there's our snare, and then there's like a whole bunch of hat stuff up here. So first thing, let's say we wanted to reduce the snare, but obviously have that region of like that sound come back when the snare isn't hitting. We could solo the band here by pressing this button. So there's the fundamental of that snare. So let's say we wanted this to duck when that's playing and then come back. You could do this, but that's going to be all the time. So you see like the fundamentals disappearing, but so is everything else that's there when that's not playing. Instead, what you do, set this back to right around 0, it could be flat, and then you go to this outer ring and drag this down. And you're going to see here, this is only going to reduce by that 12 when that's hitting, like so. So obviously it's getting other parts of the sound, it's not going to be perfect, but you see the major reduction is like when that happens, like that's when it's big. It's doing a little like micro thing before, and I think we could solo it here as well. It's making sense, and you could really overdo it, like go all the way down if you wanted to demonstrate. You see, it's not perfect, but that sounds pretty good, because the reduction when that's not playing, it's still happening, but it's not nearly as much as when that hit is actually happening. So let's go and do this to the kick as well. Here's where the kick is hitting, if we boost that. The same thing, we're going to reduce that. So now we've done something where it's cutting the kick and it's cutting the snare in a way. This would be really useful for, say, you wanted to use this loop, but add your own hits over top it, because usually those things would compete, and rather than just going in with a different EQ, for example, and just doing this, where you lose like the whole body of the sound, you get like a really thin result if you do that, which you don't necessarily want. This still lets you kind of keep the body in those lows without it actually competing. So now what we could do is grab a kick, like that. See, now we could layer our own kicks, and same thing with a snare. Just something that fits. That'll do just for an example. So just like follow the pattern like this. You see now, and let me demo why that's useful. If we take off the EQ, see, now the lows are getting all distorted, it doesn't sound good. This is doing a good job, and it's literally just an EQ plugin. It's that simple, it's very easy. And that's why I recommend really learning an EQ, because it makes this just completely fit in a matter of seconds. It's very easy to do, and it's just a very, very overpowered thing. There's a reason EQ is like just available in everything and super useful, because EQ is probably one of, if not the most helpful tools you could have when you're mixing. So that's really just using simple EQ, but in a good way, that really helps out your mix. The point of this video, I know like EQ is a very simple thing, it's one of the first things you learn, but I just wanted to talk about how important it actually is. Don't sleep on EQ if you get what I'm saying. But if this video helped you out and you found it useful, don't forget to drop a like on it and subscribe for future content from me. But thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.